Oh, I better wait a minute. Hello. Yes, I may not know what I'm talking about much. I don't know a lot about the situation ministers may be presented with daily in government. And I haven't studied economics at university. Um, but first of all, I am worried because the BBC may not be reporting things. I've had a complicated relationship with the BBC. I do care about it, and I do care about the ability to feel somewhat cozied by seeing some news presenters who have been um, presenting the news like Hugh Edwards for a long time, and I feel satisfaction when I see him and can watch him presenting the news in a semi cozy way because some of the news is very distressing anyway. Um, and but there is an element of continuity to it. But I also feel slightly worried about the fact that nostalgia culture seems to win over most things, and that people get favored who are already famous, not up and coming generations of talented people or people who are trying to make a go at things that they are often like submitted to maybe not a malicious cancel culture, but dismissed um, for whatever reason by people who vie with them to keep their own supremacy. And there is a worry that a lot of people in the UK and elsewhere may actually be anti-children and anti-women having children, um, and may I'm not saying they are not right to want to hold on to life till their late 80s. I'm not saying that, but that there was a fashion of people wanting to live very much longer than 100 that came into science quite recently. Um, and there is a little bit of a worry of vampirism about that. People may think that I'm a vampire. Um, I used to have slightly vampiric teeth at the sides before my teeth were made to look idiotic slightly. Um, I don't, yeah, because I've been excluded from having a working life. Um, I would not want people to consider me a vampire, and I have been, in some ways, very modest. It's not me that's been jetting about the world all the time. It's not me who's been redecorating every 5 minutes and chucking out old furniture, well, new furniture. Um, I have lived comfortably, and I'm thankful for that, but quite modestly in many respects. But I do want to say that there is a worry at the moment for older people as well. Hopefully, not for older people too much. It must be dreadful to be badly treated when you have become so vulnerable. It must be dreadful. I've had things through from Age UK recently, letters about people in their 80s who are worried they're going to be bullied or killed or murdered or um frozen out, left to die in cold, damp, um, miserable conditions. And I do feel empathy with them. And to some extent, in as much of a difficult situation almost myself, sometimes having absolutely no savings, for instance, because I was made to have to compete somewhat and show that I could dress nicely and that I was keeping the house up to scratch. Um, and so, yes, in order to survive, I've had to spend also most of what I get, and obviously more's going in bills than ever now. I'm grateful for the independent living capabilities, and I'm lucky because many men would not want me to be able to remain single and not be a lesbian. And I have been privileged, and I'm thankful to my country for having supported me and allowed me to do that. Partly because I mean, it is to some extent because I've been made non-sexual anyway through drugs that have been administered to me. But I am happier um not being bullied. Um maybe um uh, I don't like being bossed around. It's true, I don't. I can't tolerate it very easily. Um and sort of being given free rein for 30 odd years, it's become I've become more intolerant of being bullied around than ever. So I'm so sorry that I have become undiplomatically intolerant somewhat. It's not all my fault. I've had a lifestyle that has encouraged me to um, find my own distractions. Um, Now, yes, I was saying about the BBC. I'm not sure that it has been keeping us fully informed. The other day, I found this old newspaper that I'd kept. I'll show it to you. It's from September this year. I don't know whether you can see that because it's possibly mirror imaged. It says banks spend 65 billion to avert pensions collapse. That was on September the 29th last year. I don't know whether it's actually been registered by most people that the bank bailed the government out in a similar way. I mean, it's saying that it was to help clear um, national debt somewhat. Um, but I don't know whether it was publicised on the BBC that that had happened. And I don't know whether that means that the government are now ruled by the bank, or whether the bank has done the government a favour by continuing to support them. I know that people, according to the Times today, are saying that maybe taxes need to come down again, as Liz Truss said, which partly was alleged through Mr. Koteng to cause the need for the £65 billion to be taken care of. I'm not sure though, having thought about it and having seen other things in the Times today, that I mean, obviously the bank are gonna want growth to an extent, and we all do because people's needs hopefully um, need to be covered, and to some extent their desires as well. Happiness may it is still important. I mean, the Americans did write the idea of hopefully happiness into their constitution, somewhat into their um, idea of what that country ought to be about. Um, but we may have gone too far down the road of dream fulfillment in one way, and ended up in a mess, almost in threatening a hell for us in another. I mean, in the Times today also, they're talking about water and sewage. I'll read you a small extract from it. The BBC has stopped saying what's in the papers now, even. Um, so I will read you a small extract from it. The reason for pollution in Britain's waters includes sewage, chemical discharge, and modern agriculture. Nitrogen concentrations in rivers have increased dramatically, owing principally to the use of fertilizers and pesticides in farming. And the intensity of livestock populations on farmlands means that slurry is inexorably filling waterways, and soil erosion is aggravating those pressures. So, yes, I mean, if we just sort of take advantage of our environment too much, or exploit for commercial success the environment too much, then there may well be a looming problem. Now, the Labour Party, they were going on about things like renationalising the railways and stuff. And like, to an extent, my perception of it was that the railways were difficult to run, so they sort of pulled the wool over people's eyes in order to get funds from selling them. And private companies can't afford to cover the costs that are entailed either, because the pressure's getting worse. The more of a mess there is, the harder it is to clear up. So really, how the Labour Party thinks that they could afford to renationalise the railways, and how we're going to they've decided not to fine water companies, which is probably sensible, though the head of the water companies are seemingly earning huge amounts. I can't believe that they're doing it out of evilness. Just pouring sewage into um, waters, and that. I can't believe that they're necessarily evil. I'd prefer not to believe that. So if I prefer not to believe that, then it must be because they're struggling economically somehow. So but it is obviously a case of national interest that we need to keep what comes round and goes round and runs round absolutely in the best condition that we can. I mean, the Chinese air balloon or whatever, because of, in some ways it makes every sense because air does, our environment is a shared one to some extent across the earth. That they might have been curious as to whether America were fiddling about with weather modification experiments, and that does come into it because the waterfall, even this winter, I have noticed has not been substantial, which is great in some ways because we don't have flooding in York so much. If the waterfall isn't substantial, but I'm worried that there might be a drought again in summer. So it would, in some ways, um, I can't see that. Although they have to stimulate growth, or think they do, I can't see that cutting taxes would be a good idea.